Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Resourceful and Efficient Ambulance Billing. This is Kathy Ransom. I'm the Industry Education Coordinator here at TriTech, and I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Bonnie Tumala is a certified ambulance coder who began her career in EMS in 1993 and joined TriTech on our training team in 1999. She was an on-site trainer at that time. She still is a contracted on-site trainer with us today. In the same year, Bonnie joined Pulse EMS, where she currently serves as a business manager. In 2006, Bonnie also established EMS Billing Management, where she works one-on-one with her clients with a focus on billing and reimbursement-related activities. She provides evaluations, audit services, billing and coding, and document training, as well as performing many other client-specific services across the United States. Bonnie has had the opportunity to work directly with the law firm of Page, Wolfberg & Worth as a contracted Medicare claims reviewer and compliance officer. We encourage you to enter your questions in the question area at any time today. Just click on the red arrow to expand your GoToWebinar dashboard if it has collapsed, and enter your question at the bottom of the dashboard. We will be addressing all of the questions after the demo. And now I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Bonnie. And Bonnie, you're on.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. All right, let me see if I can share my screen here. All right, can you see my screen?
We sure can.
Okay, very good. All right, welcome, everyone. I hope you're having a great day. As we get started, I want to share some information with you. Over the years, I have worked side by side with ambulance services all over the country. I have picked up some of the best ideas. My most valued experiences come from what I've gained working with different ambulance companies. I've also, as I've traveled from place to place, have seen some of the worst cases of billing. So I want to share some of the common problems that we run across and give you some ideas and tips on how to avoid some of those things. We're going to switch over here. I want to go through some reports. If I were in your office right now, I would run a few reports that can give me a pretty good idea of the flow of work in your office. And one of the most common problems that we run into are calls that were never billed. I want to bring up a call report here. And for those of you that have the Respond Billing program, I would definitely encourage you to run these reports. In this case, we were talking about calls that were never billed. This is one report that's going to show me calls that may have fallen through the cracks. This report here is set up as a summary report. It has basic filters with a call balance, in this case, equal to 0. It's a summary report, it's a schedule event summary, and it includes all events. I'm going to run this report, and I'm going to show you some of the things that I look at when sitting in your office. Keeping in mind, all of the calls that are included in this report have a balance of 0. Most of them are moved into a 0 balance schedule. Those of you familiar with the Respond Billing program knows the program uses billing schedules that automate the billing process and controls when and how often claims and invoices go out. And when claims go unpaid, calls land in review, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. One of the things that stands out on this report right here, and this is very, very common when I look at this report, I am looking at a schedule called Medicare Electronic, a call sitting in no bill sent yet, but first thing I notice is it has no charges. I can also see that there is Insurance Primary sitting at no bill sent yet. There are 2 calls with no charges. This is one of the quickest ways for me to find calls in your office that were never billed. We're going to look at some other options as well here in a few minutes. On this report, I can also see down here at the bottom calls in an upload schedule. If you're importing data from an EPCR program or some other type of ASCII import, calls are going to move into an imported call schedule. I have actually visited services where there is as many as 1,200 calls sitting in import that have not been worked, and no one really had any idea they existed. So this report gives you a lot of information. I can definitely see here there's one call in review status. It has a 0 balance, but it's evidently paid in full and just didn't get moved to 0 balance. So definitely take a look at this report. In talking about some of the problems that we run into, calls that were never billed is definitely one of the #1 problems. I often see hundreds of unpaid Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance claims that are pending. Very often see denials that can be easily resolved that are either completely mishandled or unprocessed altogether. And also, in some cases, excessive private pay billing, and we'll talk more about that. As we talk a little bit more about calls that were never billed, I want to show you another report that I use here in the billing program. This is a charge report. We're going to bring up what we have here set up as a monthly charge report to show me how many calls were billed. I like to use the charge report because I like to look at how many base rates were billed. A call is definitely considered billed if it's got a base rate on it. I will take a look at the number of base rates that were billed, and I will compare that with other reports, possibly from your EPCR program, possibly from your dispatch. Every service has a different process for comparing the number of calls billed to the number of patients that were transported. And very often that goes by the disposition of a patient that has been treated and transported by EMS. This number right here should typically match up with the number of patients that were treated and transported by EMS. If you bill for no transports, then I suggest that you look at those numbers separately for treated and released. You'll notice on this report that we're using report categories to subtotal our numbers. Report categories are very, very helpful in your Respond billing program to create subtotals for you. If you've never used report categories, I suggest you explore them. They're up under codes and categories. And here is an example of charge code categories so that whenever we run our charge report, we have subtotals here for base rates. We have a subtotal for mileage, and we have subtotal for other charges. Other common areas for categories, very often used in credit codes. And we'll look at some of that a little bit more later on in the presentation. We also use it for schedules. Here's an example of how you might use categories on schedules. Definitely makes a difference in what your reports look like whenever you can subtotal the information by categories. Okay. Close this. But that is one of the first things we run into are calls that were never billed, and definitely have a process in place in order to verify all calls were billed. Okay. The next thing that we run into very often are unpaid Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance claims. The next report I would run if I were sitting in your office today is a call report, another schedule event summary, very much like the one we were just looking at, with a balance greater than 0. And once you set up these reports, you can save them just as I've done here. Okay. Again, this is a summary report. Call balance specification is above 0. I didn't put a date range in. I have this report set to run wide open here. If you have years and years of data in your program that a lot of it doesn't make any sense, you might want to put a call date range here, and I would definitely suggest that you look at least the last 2 years. Again, on our summary option, we want a schedule event summary, and most importantly here, which is not a default, we want to include all events. If you've never run this report in your office and you have the Respond billing program, I definitely suggest looking at it. When I look at this report, one of the first things I'm going to notice is how many calls you have sitting in review status. Our billing schedule shows that there are 46 calls sitting in Medicare Electronic Review Status with Medicare. I have looked at this number and have seen as many as 800 calls sitting in review status with Medicare. That's a lot of unpaid calls. You will also look at your insurance primary schedule, your Medicaid billing schedules. Look very closely at this. Keeping in mind, all of the calls on this report have a balance above zero. Another thing I happen to notice here, there are 2 calls in the zero balance schedule with a balance above zero. It's very common to make a mistake and accidentally set a call to zero balance when you maybe missed posting the adjustments. Maybe you forgot to balance bill a patient as you're going through the billing process. So just something that stands out here. I can tell from this report there are 13 calls ready to go to collection agency, 108 calls that are already at collection. Denials to be worked by Medicare, we have 3. Something that kind of stands out here, and I will always look for this, insurance primary schedule, I notice that there are calls in 3 of the 6 events. Anytime that I see where everything seems to stop in a schedule, and I typically expect to see things all the way down through the schedule, calls in every event, sometimes that's an indicator that there's a problem with the setup of this schedule, and maybe there's a form in here that's supposed to be printing that's not getting printed. So pay attention to that. You see everything seems to go down through the schedule and all of a sudden stop, there could be a problem. So look at this report, look at it very closely. Anytime you have a question with it, you need to be able to find these calls. Remember, you can just hit clear your report. We're going to look for calls with a balance above zero in the zero balance schedule. I'm going to run that report. It's going to be a detailed report, and it's going to show me that these 2 calls have a balance above zero, but they're in the zero balance schedule. So anything that doesn't look right on that schedule event summary, investigate it further. Find out why on earth we have these calls sitting out here. And by all means, of your unpaid Medicare, Medicaid, and so forth, if you have a good review follow-up process, for example, here we have weekly review claim status, weekly review for collection. If you're running your reports weekly, you're working anything that's in review, you won't run into the situation where you've got 800 unpaid Medicare claims. Okay?
Bonnie, this is Kathy. We're
Yes.
having a few folks asking about if this is truly a TriTech Respond Billing webinar, and just so that everyone knows, although we are using TriTech Respond Billing as our template and our database, this is a general session on EMS billing daily work processes. So although we are using Respond Billing software, most of these processes you should be able to take back and put into place in your software if you're using a different vendor software.
Right, that is correct. And if you're using a different vendor software, you will hopefully be able to look for some types of reports that you'll be able to get similar information. You'll be able to look for some type of process where you can compare the number of billed calls to the number of patients transported. And the same thing goes when we get into looking at denials and excessive private pay billing. The process is going to be different for each software. With this program, we're going to be focusing primarily on what tools and resources are available in this software, but hopefully you have similar processes available or similar tools available in your other programs. Okay. As we move along, one of the next things that we were talking about is mishandled denials. And one of the suggestions that we have, regardless of what program that you're working with, is that you are posting denials. And I'm going to show you an example in this program how if you received a denial by Medicare, you have the option in this program to post that denial, and you can post it right along in batch credits along with all of your other payments. You can post Medicare denials, Medicaid denials, insurance denials. And I definitely recommend that if you're not posting your denials, that that you can reconsider that and consider posting, and not only posting the denial, but posting the denial reason. And when you've posted the denials and you have the denial reasons in front of you, you have valuable reporting information, and you will also be able to troubleshoot whether or not these denials are being resolved. Most common denial we're seeing these days right now, name and ID number mismatch, denial code 140 for Medicare. If you have a single character out of place in a name or an ID number, chances are your claim is going to be denied. Typically, very easy to resolve denial. The next one that we're seeing most commonly is the denial reason 109, not covered by this payer contractor. If the patient has a Medicare Advantage plan, this is a very common denial that we're seeing come back from the Medicare contractors, not covered by this payer contractor. And if you're posting the denials or you have some way to report on these, it is very valuable, and you can also tell whether or not these claims are being resolved appropriately. Okay. I do want to show you a couple of reports in the program that you will benefit from posting, and the code analysis is a good report for looking at what types of denials you're getting and how often you're getting denials. We've set here the code to analyze is denials on credits. We run that report, and this report here is going to show us how often and what types of denials that we're getting. Okay. Another report that we can use in this program is a credit report. And in this case, because I've mentioned that denial code 140 and 109 are very common and usually very easy to resolve, I can run this report to be able to see specifically what calls have received these denials and what schedule they're in and whether or not they're being worked. It shows me here we've got 6 claims that have denied by Medicare. And of those 6 claims, they're all sitting in review status with Medicare. If you've got somebody who is reviewing your Medicare claims, these accounts are being worked. Okay. We'll close that. Another tool that's available to you in the Respond Billing program for working denials is actually your Easy Review module. The Easy Review module is an add-on module that allows you to create your reports right on your screen. And here is an example of a report for unresolved denials, where we have selected a denial reason not covered by this payer contractor. We can run that, and for every call that was denied for that reason, we can go directly into the call and we can work it to be able to see when it was denied, what's been done since it's denied, and has it been resolved and has it been paid. Okay, excuse me just a second. Okay. We've got several tools in the program if you're posting your denials. And like I said, not just your Medicare denials, your Medicaid denials, insurance denials, all denials can be posted right alongside of your payments. Okay. Another very common problem when doing a billing evaluation that we run into is excessive private pay billing. And what does that mean? Well, typically if I go into a place where you don't get hospital face sheets or you're just not sure who to bill, the easiest way to bill a call is to bill it private pay. Definitely not the easiest way to get it paid. This Easy Review module is also one of my favorite tools to identify excessive private pay billing. And what I do there is I set this up so that I look specifically for Medicare age patients, the age as of today, greater than 65. And I will also set it to find them anybody that's setting out their billing as private pay that maybe has a full balance account above $500. But I have definitely ran this utility to find there are hundreds and hundreds of Medicare age patients that are billed as private pay. Generally, you can go to your hospital to get a hospital face sheet to be able to get the information on their Medicare. If you've got an 89-year-old female, chances are they have Medicare or some kind of Medicare Advantage. Sometimes it's necessary to bill private pay. I absolutely understand that. When all efforts are exhausted, you're not able to come up with a Medicare number anywhere, and in some cases they just don't have Medicare. But if you've got hundreds and hundreds of Medicare age patients that are billing out as private pay, and absolutely go unpaid, because hopefully if you bill them out as private pay, they'll call in with their insurance information. Many of us know that that doesn't always happen. Okay. The other one that I'd use here for following along the same lines, I also get out my Medicare eligibility website, or I'm sorry, Medicaid eligibility websites, and I will look at children under the age of 17. Sometimes this goes very quickly. If I've got an 8-year-old patient, I've got a name and date of birth, or even a name, date of birth, and Social Security number, I can go to most state Medicaid eligibility websites and identify if this child is Medicaid eligible. In a lot of states, very, very common that your young children that are private pay have Medicaid coverage. So if you have a tool or an option in your program to be able to run reports on your patients that are over 65 or Medicare age patients, or the children and that are set up billing as private pay, I would recommend. Definitely recommend looking at that. Okay, we're moving right along. We've got a lot of information to cover. We're going to keep going. One of the next tools in the program that we have an option for, and it is an optional add-on module, happens to be the form editor. And the form editor module will allow us to create any kind of form that you could possibly come up with. I'm going to open up a form here. Here, for example, is a customer's custom collection letter. The standard program, and in many other programs, has a very standard invoice that goes out, a first bill, a second bill, a third bill, and they look pretty much exactly the same. With the form editor module, you have an option to create custom forms that automatically generate in your schedules, as, for example, a final notice. We're going to take a look in billing, and we're going to look at printing itemized bills. We have set up in this system the final notice letter, and we'll show you an example. The forms generate in a batch, and here is an example of a final notice custom form that you can create. Also, as a time-saving tool, you can set up a collection agency referral form as well. Collection agency referral form can be created to the specifications of your collection agency. They can tell you exactly what information that they need on that collection agency referral. Maybe they want the Social Security number, the employer, the date of birth, whatever information there. And once you have it set up, you will be able to generate your collection agency file. If you set it to print it to a file, you set it to print to a CSV format, you can send it out to Excel to upload it to a secure website, or send it through secure email to your collection agency. This time-saving tool will definitely allow you the option to send your accounts to collection agency just as quickly as you send your accounts, send your electronic claims to Medicare. Okay. The other examples of a custom form that I wanted to give you, and I'll give you a couple of different ideas on the custom forms. Other examples include a hardship charity discount application. I've seen that set up in the system. I have seen I'll just open one of these forms. The Medicare redetermination request form built into the program to where it automatically generates if you put it into the appeal schedule for Medicare. A physician certification statement. Last week I had set up in a company that they're commonly sending out a fax request over to the hospital for a hospital face sheet. We set it up to where it automatically generates from the program, and it logs it in the history that they have sent over a request for face sheet to the hospital. Is there a problem with the sound? No? Okay.
Nope, I think we're okay.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, and also going over some more time-saving tools in the program to demonstrate. Batch credits. And I apologize if I'm going too fast through some of these things. I've got a lot of things on this list here to cover. The batch credits add-on module, and it includes the contract write-off poster here, is a place where you can go in and you can set up and post your Medicare payments and adjustments very quickly. And here's where I gave you the example where you can also post your denials. There are some settings here that are important in batch credits. You have an option to load batch credit settings. This is the time saver that allows you to default down things like your check number and your check date, your deposited date, your from payer. Definitely saves you a lot of time. You type that check number in one time and it defaults that information from one entry to the next. Some of the top 10 items that we had mentioned that a lot of people don't know, one of them has to do with batch credits. Under your edit, there is also an adjustments. If you realized after posting your batch that maybe you got the wrong date in place, or maybe you've got a wrong receipt number or something like that, you can go to your adjustments and you can say adjust my entire batch to have the correct receive date. And the entire batch will be adjusted. Okay. Once you have posted once you have balanced here in batch credits, and we're going to just put in a Medicare, we'll post a Medicare payment, setting who is the next payer and the next schedule. If you have a check number and a check date, you would put that in there as well. And 05 and 13. Okay. Once your remaining cash is 0 and you're in balance right here on the screen, the cash to post and the amount that you've posted is in balance, you can just simply post the batch. Okay. Very, very critical time-saving module here. I'm going to close here. I have another module here that is an add-on that I want to take a look at, and that is called quality assurance. And I'm going to go up to, I'm going to go to data entry and call. We're going to take a look at the quality assurance module, which is statistics here. And with this, you have an option to create your own questions and create your own possible answers. And in this case, we had set up a statistic called flag this call. And basically where this came from is I had a customer that came to me and said, you know, we really need a way to be able to track these it was actually Hurricane Katrina transfers. We need a way to be able to report on these and identify them later. So what we did is we created a statistic question called Flag This Call, and it turned out that we were able to use it for the Hurricane Katrina transfers, or in this case we set up Joplin tornado victim transfers, but we ended up using it for lots of things. They wanted to flag anytime they've got poor documentation. We had the billers coming back and say, okay, this report is terrible. You know, it's like, okay, flag the report, we will flag that call, we will be able to report on it later. Or maybe we needed to take a look at something that was absolutely excellent documentation because we're getting ready to do a documentation class and we really want some examples to give us some ideas on what to present in a documentation training. I had one company that wanted to be able to track the phone calls from the angry, upset customers. Okay, so we have, once you've set it up, the sky is the limit as far as what you want to be able to track. Completely up to you. Other examples of how this has been used, as you can see here, I've seen companies that also track whether the crew are getting signatures. Whether, you know, maybe the patient refused to sign, the patient was unable to sign. This is another way, another excellent tracking tool. And again, you have lots of valuable reporting on this if you're using it. I'm going to show you the code analysis, and this is an example of where we've used flags. And it shows us exactly how often we've used each one, on how many calls. And on our call report, we can see a detailed list. For example, Medicare audited claims, flexible filter, we set flag this call, Medicare audited claims. We will be able to see a list of every call that was flagged as a Medicare audited claim. Okay. The other thing we have to cover is some of the top 10, I didn't know that, about respond billing. We're going to take a look at some of those. But before I go further, I wanted to remind you again that some of the processes to have in place is to have a way to balance the billed calls to the patients transported. Have a specific and consistent claim follow-up process in whatever billing program that you're using. If you're billing electronically, I suggest that you receive and review all claim acceptance reports. Definitely been into plenty of offices where an entire batch of Medicare claims, sometimes several batches of Medicare claims, were never accepted. And when we're trying to troubleshoot why there are so many unpaid claims, it's simply because our electronic claims were rejected. Suggesting that you post your denials saves time in the follow-up process and you have valuable reports on it. Verifying the accuracy of your payment posting is also very important. Too often we see a lot of the claims that come up for review end up being paid. We just didn't get it posted. So if you are verifying the accuracy of payment posting by possibly balancing your payment posting to deposits, definitely recommended practice. And most of all, using the resources that you have available to save time and be more efficient in your billing process. I want to take a look at some of the top 10. I didn't know about that in Respond Billing. Okay. We're going to bring up a couple of different calls. Whenever we're looking at a call, in the billing program. On the event history, we're able to see the forms that have gone out, when they went out, and very commonly this is missed right here, this line, next due on May the 4th, the final bill is ready to go out. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to point out is one of the hotkeys in the Respond Billing program that you can use is a Control T as in Tom. Control T as in Tom will reverse the date order. If you want to see the most recent activity at the top of the list, Control T, and that's going to switch it around. And that's going to be the same with your call search or any other screen that has a date and time on it. Okay, we're going to move over to the patient side. And I wanted to show you how you can print a single statement. Now, if a patient walks into your office, or for some reason a patient that has multiple accounts would like to see a statement of all of their accounts, there is an option on the patient side, and this particular patient has multiple accounts, and if there's, for whatever reason, they want to see a single statement of all of those accounts, you have an option to print that single statement right there under data entry, and you just select your form code for your patient statement, print that, and it's going to show the amount due for all of the accounts. Okay. Moving right along. Another top 10, I didn't know that in the Respond Billing program, has to do with this override billing parameters, or override billing indexes. And when on earth would I ever use this? What this will do is if you hit override billing indexes and you hit print, it's going to print a final notice letter for every call in your system. You wouldn't want to do that. But if you were to say, for example, you set up a final notice letter and you would really like to send it to just those accounts that are ready for collection, and before you actually send it, you might want to just go ahead and make one last attempt. Typically, your final notice letter will be the last event that happens in your billing schedules. But in the case that today I'm setting up this final notice letter, and I want to, before I send those accounts to collection, they haven't received a final notice letter, I want to go ahead and set this up. You can by using the override billing indexes, you can set your filters and tell it these are the calls. This patient's missing an address. These are the calls that qualify for the letter, and override the billing indexes and run it. I have also seen this used when companies want to send out their notice of privacy practices. Maybe they want to send out their notice of privacy practices based on a date range. They've finished working the 1st through the 5th, and they put in a call date range of the 1st through the 5th. They set it up in their custom form to print out their notice of privacy practices, and they send it out. Every patient receives a copy of their privacy practices by using this override billing indexes, regardless of what schedule the call is in, just based on the call date. Okay. Under your call, taking a look at a call report, I wanted to make sure that everybody also realizes that any of the reports in your destination, you have an option to print them to a file. You can print them to a PDF. You can print them to a CSV. So anytime you're running reports, whether you're reviewing your unpaid Medicare claims, anything like that, you can run these reports, print them out, and put them into Excel and manipulate them that way. Okay? Another thing that I'll often look at when I'm looking at the call search, I might look at the charges, and a hotkey Control End and Control Home will take you to the top and the bottom of the list. I went into one service and they had charges of something about $20,000 on one call where they accidentally billed multiple base rates instead of mileage. So this is kind of a good check indicator. Taking a look at what call in your system has the highest charges. And in this case, we went 245 miles, and that's why the balance is so high on it. This is also often done on the patient side, the patient account balance, do a control end, and who in the system owes you the most money. And you get very quick information right there. Okay. One of the things that I've found that a lot of people don't realize as well in reports, and this is if you are logged in as system supervisor like I am logged in right now, and you will not typically ever log in as system supervisor, only to do a few specific things, and one of them here is if for whatever reason you want to transfer the ownership of a particular report. This is a report that we run every month. You will have the option to transfer the ownership of that report. If that employee is no longer there and you need to transfer these parameters to someone else, you would have the option to do that here. Okay. And on the same note, under the security profiles, whenever you're looking at your security, you have an option to set or allow the security to override billing parameters. So if you, and not typically for the user profile, but your system administrators, if you have ever found yourself where you are not able to delete a parameter, you're not able to save changes, maybe it's because you're not able to override the parameters owned by somebody else. Just set this check, save it, and as long as you are set up as a system administrator, you're going to be able to make those changes. We're going to move right along here. How are we doing? On time? We're doing okay. Couple more things and we're done here, and then we'll go into some question and answers. One other report I wanted to show you very quickly, the event history report, and this is another top 10. I didn't know that in the Respond billing program. And if you want to see a list of all of the bills that go out, and I have one company that runs this report on a weekly basis, and they keep tabs on how many electronic claims go out on average every week, how many insurance claims go out, how many signature forms are going out, are our crews getting signatures, and so on. This tells us how many bills went out the door. And if you're looking at this on a regular basis, you'll kind of get an idea, and especially whenever you see a drop in the numbers on Medicare claims that went out last week or last month and so forth, and you might get an idea as to why the revenue has dropped or why the income has dropped. Okay. The other thing that I had mentioned on here is that you are able to open this billing program twice without using a second user license on each workstation. I've run into problems where somebody is doing data entry and they're also taking phone calls from patients. They stop in the middle of what they're doing and they get interrupted again and again and again, and that's where you end up with situations where calls have no charges. So keep in mind that in most cases, if you've got the program in-house, you can open the program more than once and take your phone calls and keep going right where you were at. Okay? In review, have a process in place to verify all billable calls are accounted for and billed. Have a specific and consistent follow-up process. Always review your claim acceptance reports when you're billing electronically. If possible, post your denials so that you have reporting ability on that and it saves time in your follow-up process. Verify the accuracy of your payment posting. and again, use the resources you have available to save time and be more efficient in your ambulance billing. Okay, Kathy, I believe we've got everything covered that I had on the agenda for today.
All right, great. Well, now's the time that we're going to address the questions, and we'd like to remind you to click on the red arrow to expand your GoToWebinar dashboard if it has collapsed. Please go ahead and enter any questions for our speakers at the bottom of the GoToWebinar dashboard. So, Bonnie, the first question that we have is, how do I know what modules I have?
Yes, very, very good question. And if you were to go up to Help and About.
And if you want to go ahead and show us that, I think you'll need to share your screen again.
Okay, got it. Got that cue here. All right. Under Help and About, there is a tab here for the modules, and the add-on modules that you have are listed here. Very common that I would go into a place, I look to see what modules you have, and I look to see how many of them are not being used. And you would be surprised how often you run into situations that they had no idea that they had specific modules and or how to use them.
And Bonnie, kind of to tag along with that, in the help system, if you would show us how we could print out those hotkeys or verify where those hotkeys are.
Okay. Yes, definitely. I refer to the hotkeys very often, and if you want to be fast working in the billing program, definitely recommend it. We're going to go to Help and let's see, Documentation, Billing Station, and look in the index and type in hotkeys, and you will be able to see the list of hotkeys here. And I hit Display, and here they are.
And then maybe if you could go through those steps one more time. I
Yep,
think that was a little fast.
That was a little fast. We'll go to Help. And get my cursor to work. Got my mouse too far away. Documentation, Billing Station. On the index, type in hotkeys. And there they are. Okay. And you can print those out and see a list of all of the common hotkeys used in the billing program.
Okay, perfect. A couple of other questions. One question has to do with how would you develop a report based on one of your statistics? So how would you go into the report and actually see the statistic answers?
Okay. Actually, the statistics are amazing. You are going to find on your flexible filters, you're going to find your flexible filters tab on all of your reports. So anytime you set up a statistic, you have all financial and statistical reports available to you, and you can report on it. Down here where I have flexible filters, I have the statistics, and for example, I flagged this call. If I wanted to find a call that I have flagged for poor documentation, for example, I hit OK, I run it, and it's going to show me every call that we have flagged for poor documentation. Now, you have this tab pretty much on all of your reports, so that whether you're running a charge report, a credit report, a call report, you're going to be able to set filters here on these things.
Okay. The next question has to do with a patient statement. The question is, can you show us again how to bill a patient statement with multiple calls? Okay. And will this work if you have a call that's in a hold schedule? Not to generate multiple statements while one call is being paid off.
Okay. If we, and I clicked on the account balance because and hit the Control N to find somebody in our system that has several accounts, which I did that here, and I can see the list. And under data entry, the option here is to print a single statement, and then I can look for my form code. If your form code's not set up, you can go through the steps of setting that up, which is done under Codes and Forms. But very typically you will have a form code already in place for your patient statement. Now if you have particular schedules that you don't want to include, you can set that under your optional filters, saying that I want to include everything that's in private pay, but I don't want to include anything that's sitting in hold. So you can pick here what calls may be included in that, on that statement, and then hit your print. It's going to preview it up to the screen, and then you can hit print again.
All right. Bonnie, another question has to do with those calls that we found out that have a zero balance, but they're not in the zero balance schedule. What's the best way to move all of those calls to that zero balance schedule?
If you've got hundreds of calls that are not in a zero balance schedule, there is a utility, and you would definitely have to contact support to get access to this utility. But there's a utility in the program called the Update Schedule Event utility, and it will allow you to move multiple calls to a particular schedule. And in this case, we would say update calls to the zero balance schedule, and we would set several filters. Very critical that you look at this very closely, but the call balance would have to be equal to 0, and whether or not you want to include calls without charges. Before you use this utility, you definitely want to run call reports to verify what you want to move. Typically, if I'm running this, I will move anything that's in a billing schedule. I will exclude anything that's in the collection agency schedule, if it's maybe written off to bad debt, unless I just simply want to move it. But if it's in a no transport schedule, I will leave them in the no transport schedule, and so on. But this utility is available to you that you can move those calls in one big sweep.
All right. Several people have asked, I have the custom form module, how do I use it? And so I'm going to go ahead and answer that briefly, that before you get started, what you would want to do is take a trip out to our website, and in the recorded classes there is a class on the custom forms. It's a brief, less than 20-minute class, and it does go through the steps and how the wizard works, etc.
Okay. Yes, very good. Yes, it is very complex module. Definitely takes some time to learn. Very much worthwhile to learn it if you can do it.
Another question is, what's the benefit of moving calls into the zero balance schedule, getting them out of the way, so to speak?
Really, the only balance to move them to, the only benefit to moving them is a better way to be able to find the calls with no charges. When I see calls that are in a billing schedule that have a balance of 0, that's kind of a red flag to me that there may be calls in that mix that don't have charges. If you've got a lot of calls right now that are all in billing schedules, you might run a detail report and look at the balance on, or look at the charge line, and make sure that they all have charges on them, because what I find very often is that there will be hit and miss calls in there that have no charges. Just like that example that I gave, we get distracted while we're putting this in and it never gets billed.
All righty. Can you please give us an example of setting up a statistic code? So I know we had talked about a couple that you had. I know most recently I have helped someone set up a statistic code that for their EPCR usage, and they want to know which floor they actually transported the patient to. So that would be an example of a statistic that I've used recently. Bonnie, do you have other examples?
I have another example that had to do with EPCR as well, and they wanted to be able to report just specifically on calls that had narcotics used. And we set that up, and it was actually going to be answered by the crew on the Fusion EPCR. But to do this, what you have to do is you have to go to Utilities and Database Setup. And this is step 1. I believe it's at least a 3-step process here in creating your statistics. And here we would set up a statistic name. And whatever example, if we've got narcotics used, we can indicate that here, and then you indicate what type of question. And it can be, and this is important, it's a single selection or multiple selection means that I'm going to create the possible answers. The one that we had, and I'm going to click on here, patient signature. Patient signature obtained is one, and this one was set up as a single selection statistic, which means I'm going to create the possible answers, and I'll show you how to do that. Your other options here are a text entry, yes, no, unknown, yes, no, not applicable, and then you can also select from code files if you need to pull in your location codes, your crew, procedures, and so forth. In this case, patient signature obtained. And then once you have it set up, you can go under your codes and you go to your statistic codes. You're going to find your statistic that you've just created, and you can create the possible answers. And in this case, they set up yes, no, patient unable to sign, and patient refused to sign as possible answers to this statistic. So once you have created the statistic and you created the possible answers, you have to add that to your call type. And in here we have to know what our call types are. And in this case, it's the default. So under Utilities, I'm going to go into Call Data Setup, bring up DFLT, which is our call type that we have in place, and go to our Statistic tab. And I'm going to have to select here and find, and here we've got patient authorized signatures already there, but if we want to do the floor level, we could accept it, and now this will be on all of your calls with the call type of DFLT. I go to my Statistic tab and I can see it here. And then, and I definitely will warn you on the statistics, it adds to data entry. I am hesitant to put too much on data entry to answer questions that are not necessary unless it is very important information and you use that information. And if you do, by all means, set it up and answer those questions. And whether you answer it only in specific cases like here, when you've got a thank you note or appreciation letter and you want to be able to flag it so you can let the crew know later on that, that we received something on it, doesn't add to data entry, just only in specific situations.
Okay. Several of our attendees have asked about the billing schedules, and they have said, my schedules don't look like Bonnie's schedules. What can they do about that? One thing that we do offer here at TriTech is something called a billing checkup, and the billing checkup is about an hour session of which usually I get dialed in, this is Kathy, and run some scripts against your database and take a look at what your schedules are actually doing. I do use that schedule event summary report that Bonnie was talking about earlier in the presentation. That said, we also take a look at some of your schedules and how they are set up. And if we do find that you do have dead ends or that you have schedules that quite honestly aren't producing the type of reports or type of invoices, type of documentation that you'd like them to, or they don't make sense, or there's too much going on, then we can get dialed in and do what we call a billing cleanup. And yes, there is a fee for that, especially if we find that there are many things that have to be cleaned up. I have spent well over 16 hours at a couple customer sites working with them to get cleaned up. But we'd be more than happy to take a look at those schedules for you and see if it looks like there's any problems or not.
Yes, wonderful. That's a very valuable service right there, yes.
Okay. One question says you spoke earlier about running a report to make sure that your electronic batches were actually sent out. Can you go through that again? I think maybe that was your no bill sent yet report. If you could maybe just show that one again.
Okay, and actually what I talked about there, I believe, was verifying that you have received confirmation when you're billing electronically. One of the reports that I did show here is an all billing report that showed how many claims were filed over a specific time, and we put in a date range here, and we set what forms we wanted to look at, and in this case we set all forms. But if you wanted to look at just your Medicare and what was billed out for Medicare, you could select just the one form, and then on our summary option we said just show us a form summary, and I can run this and I can see everything that was billed out. But when we're talking about billing electronically and verifying that you have received all of your confirmation reports back, when you're filing Medicare electronically or you're filing through a clearinghouse, very often they're going to be sending you back some kind of a confirmation acceptance report, usually the next day, that'll tell you that those claims were accepted and sent on for processing. The problem I do run into is that too often we don't download those confirmation reports. We find out sometimes months later that that the batch was never accepted, but those reports come back from Medicare.
Okay, and the last question, Bonnie, has to do with how long it should a typical call take to process, to do the data entry into the billing system. And that's kind of a loaded question just because there's a lot of variables.
A lot of variables for sure. If you are keying in that information manually and nothing imports, a lot of it depends on how much information you're putting in. You know, are you putting in all of the times? Are you putting in all of the detailed information? I have seen this number all over the place, where you're taking, 10 minutes per call up to doing, 10, 15 calls an hour.
Yep.
But,
so I think the industry average used to be somewhere around 4,000 calls per year per full-time employee. Is that about right, Bonnie?
Oh, as far as how many people do you need in your operation?
Yeah.
Per call volume? Yes. I'm seeing it a little closer to about 3,500. Whenever I go into an office that is very understaffed, it becomes very obvious whenever we're looking at back-end reports and follow-up reports. There a few years ago they were saying 5,000 one person should be able to process as many as 5,000 calls a year. That's true in a very large organization where you have dedicated staff that do nothing but oversee all of the points of the billing. But whenever you've got 4 or 5 billers that are trying to handle the entire operation, I would recommend closer to 3,500.
Okay. Well, we have ran out of time. Bonnie, I would like to thank you very much for sharing these insights. As always, we welcome your feedback and have our contact information. We'll get that up on the slide here. If you have any comments or questions, we'd like to thank you all for joining us, and we wish you all a great afternoon. Thank you.
Bye.